Hi, I'm Kathryn Jean Lopez from the National Review Institute, and welcome all of you. This event is an initiative of the Institute for Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America, which is the nation's leading academic institute dedicated to the scientific study of human flourishing in the light of Catholic social doctrine. It's also co-sponsored by the National Review Institute and the Catholic Women's Forum at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. And I'm so excited to welcome Erika Bachiochi and Sister Magdalene Teresa. And you know what, instead of me reading a long intro or anything, Erika, first, can you just tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a wife of almost 20 years and a mother of 7 children. 4 girls and 3 boys, one of whom's 2.5, and the eldest is in college now. I am a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center and also a senior fellow at the Abigail Adams Institute, which is in Cambridge, which serves the Harvard community. And I've just founded the Wollstonecraft Project there, looking to work on sort of issues of sexual equality and freedom within kind of a robust realist metaphysics and a virtue ethics orientation. And I'm very excited that I have a book coming out from Notre Dame University Press called The Rights of Women Reclaiming a Lost Vision, which kind of builds on much of my work in kind of feminist legal theory and constitutional law.
Erika, I'm so excited to have you because you really are such a sane and also precise voice in talking about feminism and Catholic social doctrine and individual rights in a context of humanity. And anyhow, it's really, I'm looking forward to this conversation about what it means to be pro-life with you. And Sister Magdalene from the Sisters of Life, who runs the Visitation Mission. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your work, yourself and your work, where you came from?
Oh, sure. Well, I just wanted to say my blood sister has 7 children, so I happen to really love people with 7 children. Way to go. I know what it means. a little bit. But anyway, so I've been the superior of this Visitation Mission for 16 years here, and we've been working with pregnant women who, you know, they're not sure what they're going to do, and they're usually feeling a lot of pressure towards abortion. Every story is unique and pretty much unrepeatable, but we really just walk with them as they discover, hopefully, their maternity and discover the way forward into choosing life. And really shepherding them out of the woods where a whole bunch of people are putting a lot of pressure. And what we found is there's so many great opportunities for pregnant women to learn and really discover their own capacity to love. And so we just want to help them become who they actually already are. And it's been so beautiful to just, you know, I feel like it's a privilege. Like, I really haven't pushed papers around for my whole time, and to be able to walk with somebody hand in hand about something so deep and so meaningful. I know that I'm spoiled, you know, and it's really a joy. We do change a couple diapers, but not as many as others. So, yeah.
And Sister Magdalene was just talking to me this morning about, you know, how important it is to celebrate a birthday. Because so many women don't even love themselves enough to acknowledge their birthdays.
Yeah, well, I think single moms, basically, they have children, but the children don't know it's their mom's birthday, so nobody's really celebrating their birthday. And so we have this thing about trying to celebrate the mom's birthday as many as we can in a year, you know, for each woman a different day. But it's been really amazing to find out and hear that this is the first birthday I've ever celebrated, and they're like at least 27, and you're thinking, oh my gosh. So it's been a joy to teach people how to celebrate, you know, because that's part of celebrating life, is probably part of creating a culture of life. So yeah, it's a great little way to make a difference. Yeah.
Well, and there's so many little ways, and that's part of why I wanted to get us together and what I'd like us to talk about. For anybody who doesn't know, Sister Magdalene is a member of the Sisters of Life, which was founded 27 years ago by Cardinal John O'Connor. And Cardinal O'Connor said, well, first of all, he founded it. He had a newspaper column and said, we need some women, come if you're called, you know, instead of the charism. It's a fourth vow that you take to the charism of life. And Cardinal O'Connor said to the world, basically, you know, if you're a woman in need who is pregnant and needs help, come to the Catholic Church. And the Sisters of Life are the answer to how the Catholic Church will help, you know. And you have so many, you have, I want to say over 15,000 co-workers around the country and world,
in the whole country. And yeah, we're starting to go beyond, like, you know, into other countries. Yeah, exactly.
And so these are people who the Sisters of Life can call on, and obviously people are at different levels of involvement, but if there's a woman in California who needs diapers or needs to be needs a friend to go along with her for a doctor's appointment, one of the things Sister Magdalene makes me aware of is how deep and long the battle is. Even going to a doctor's appointment, sometimes the pressure will be so great to abort. And so you want a friend there, you know, who will advocate for you. We'll talk more about that. First, Erika, let's just answer the question. And first I should interrupt you. There's a chat box for anyone watching who wants to ask questions. So to do that, feel free throughout the conversation. So Erika, there is a lot of controversy, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of even manipulation of the phrase, the word pro-life, right? And what the pro-life movement is. I sometimes wonder if the majority of the country knew what the pro-life movement or the March for Life was until last year when a president showed up, right? Who obviously made a lot of headlines. You know, you and Sister Magdalene are the pro-life movement. I don't think people know the pro-life movement on the front lines. And so that's part of what I wanted to help do today. But what does it mean to be pro-life as far as you're concerned, Erika?
It's obviously a big question, and I feel incredibly honored to be with the two of you. I actually, it's sort of why I showed up, frankly. Thank you, Kathryn, for having me, and Sister, for all of your work. I'm such an admirer of all that you do. And I guess sort of the best way for me to answer that question is maybe by taking you back to the when I was in college, which was many years ago now, but I was a leader of the Women's Center at Middlebury College, a very liberal school in Vermont, and was very pro-choice. I had grown up in a nominally Catholic home, but we didn't attend Mass or anything like that. My mother was married and divorced 3 times by the time I got to college. And I had spent quite a bit of my teen years acting out of the pain that all of that caused. But I actually had this incredible grace through suffering of 2 of my friends, actually within 3 years of each other, took their own lives. And it kind of sent me spiraling down, where I ended up in 12-step meetings. And it taught me that where I, you know, was among many people who were incredibly hospitable to me, and really sacrificed just their time and you know, just so much of their lives to care for me in a time which was very difficult for me. So they also taught me how to pray, most importantly. And I really clung to that and prayed sort of throughout the day as I was leading the Women's Center. And what first led me to kind of question my pro-choice views was actually down in DC. I was working for a semester on welfare reform during the Clinton years. And I was working in this really great think tank. And as I became kind of immersed with the problems of the poor, I just became more and more kind of put off by the idea put forth by my pro-choice allies that abortion was really the kind of you know, a chief means to help the poor. And, you know, I wasn't then aware of the eugenic history of abortion in our country. I wasn't aware of pro-life feminists at that point at all. I wasn't aware of the many maternity homes and crisis pregnancy centers around the country. But what happened, which was really incredible, I met two really amazing women. One was through her book, Rights Talk, the great Marianne Glendon, Harvard law professor, who, the book is not an explicitly pro-life book, but in one section, she talks about how in American culture, American legal culture, we leave women with their constitutional rights and nothing else. That we just kind of, expect that, they're in their autonomy going to, make good decisions for themselves, but we don't give them care. We don't try to set out a hospitable kind of community for them. And so that was really striking to me because of how I'd been kind of cared into, loved into healing at that point, still not back into the Catholic Church by then. And then I met another woman, and that is the great Helen Alvarez, who came to our class as a pro-life speaker. She was working for the bishops then. And she came one day and a pro-choice speaker came the other day. And I can tell you, I don't remember a single argument either of them made, but I remember just Helen's beautiful kind of charisma and her love and her joy, especially her joy, because it was something I so longed for at that point in my life. And then I remember the pro-choice speaker, and I don't remember a single argument she made, which is funny because I'm in the business of making arguments. But I do remember that she was, she was just one woman among many pro-choice women, but she had a lot of anger and resentment. And it opened my heart. Both of those meetings opened my heart to something new, the possibility that kind of, accompanying, as our Holy Father talks about, women through making life more, making kind of culture more hospitable to life, was a possibility. And then I'll stop and let others speak, but then I came to understand what pro-lifers were doing around the country, like on the ground in terms of maternity centers and crisis pregnancy centers. And I was just dumbfounded that there were actually people who were taking up this cause in a real way. And like, just as I had been loved by these people and who'd sacrificed so much to give me sort of a chance at happiness, that they were doing that exact same thing to women in crisis pregnancies. And it again opened me further. And so then, as I prayed, I came to be more open, I guess, to pro-life arguments too. And then that's sort of what brought me around. So I guess the short answer to your question is that I think really it's kind of, it's hospitality. It's hospitality both in our own lives, in being open to life, both in our own marriages, but especially too with our friends and relatives and neighbors and communities, and helping support women. I don't support women in crisis pregnancies as much, but I try to support my friends, one of whom had triplets, and already had 3 other children, and helped encourage my daughters to do the same, and really reaching out to help mothers and fathers really be hospitable in their own lives, and then trying to find ways to shape law and culture so it's more hospitable to life and those who nurture life, especially mothers and fathers.
I think that, as the country is so chaotic and violent, really, on both sides and all sides, there's just such a need to kind of be simple and love and be welcoming. I think that hospitable point is so important. And the virtues, I don't think people appreciate the power of these things. Mm-hmm. And when you were talking about hospitality, the woman behind me there is Dorothy Day, and she wrote a book on hospitality, and always was thinking, what more can I do to love? And I think that's what we have to do. And that's not a political program, but it will make the political programs better, I would think. Sister Magdalene, what Erika was just saying about when you discover, what pro-lifers are doing, people like you, this is why I'm taking you away from your boiler and you're saving lives and you're praying, because I want people to know about you and the work that you do and what you see every day, and how hard the battle is, but also how possible it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I was just you know, very similar to the hospitality is, I think the view about pro-life work and everything is that, you know, somebody's trying to save a life, sometimes even coerce someone to choose life, right? But I think what is missed in those thoughts is that it's so much about the capacity of a woman to love. And I think that in our culture in general, people don't really give the woman the credit that they have this enormous capacity. They have, like, their love is big, you know? And I think that we want to kind of diminish their love by saying, oh, you're in that situation, you should just end the life of your child. You know, you can't get yourself out of this. You can't be smarter than this and find a route through, instead of, you know, ending everything, but go through it, you know, to suffer through it. That is something that I think is true. And I think being able to think about the idea of suffering pain in order to get to another place is also a philosophical idea that people haven't embraced. You know, who suffers? Who thinks there's anything on the other side of suffering? But you know, suffering pregnancy or suffering being alone during a pregnancy is hard, but there's such a reward. And I think a lot of the women who've chosen life with us, you know, they have seen the enormous capacity of their own hearts. They've seen how the baby opened doors that would have never been opened, and that their life was actually better. You know, and I know it's easy for me to say, and maybe not everyone is gonna wanna believe it, but I've just seen that when we kind of cut off the maternal instinct of a woman, then we're not giving her what is actually amazing. I mean, in nature, you might have seen lionesses, right? They are the strongest animals defending their cubs. And so that's kind of like, the strength of a woman is enormous, and she can get through a tough time in order to get to the other side because of love. And it's an enormous strength that women have. And I think that we don't give her that credit by having abortion so available. And, you know, the line that women deserve better than abortion, I think is enormously true in this sense, you know.
And I have mentioned this to people a couple of times recently. I have always avoided praying outside abortion clinics for the most part, in part because I just didn't want to see, you know, I already knew what I didn't really want to see. But I started doing that in December, and oh my goodness, you know, to go from reading political commentary and things and hearing some of the rhetoric, and then to see the faces of these young girls who do not look like they're exercising their empowerment. They look miserable. They look even more miserable when they leave. When you see, you know, I sometimes see well-intentioned, respectful pro-lifers with Sisters of Life brochures, and we'll say something like, there's help, there's even free housing if you want to keep your baby. And sometimes you see a girl perk up. Sometimes you see her boyfriend glare at her and make clear that she's not considering that. And I worry that we've become too comfortable as a society with abortion being legal, so we don't really think about it. And even people who, myself included, consider ourselves pro-life, do pro-life things, you know, every day are we praying for an end to abortion. I mean, there's like a checklist of things that you could do that are not actually, you know, being a Sister of Life or working at a crisis pregnancy center. You know, as Erika was talking about, just looking around your community and seeing the needs. I often say that evangelicals are at an advantage because they're often one church, you know, there's not this big bureaucracy. I think Catholics often think, well, you know, Catholic Charities is taking care of all these problems. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you're a person on a block and there are needs in the vicinity of that block, probably on that block. And, you know, if you go to a parish, there are needs there. I often talk about adoption and foster care, and how many of us even know if there are any adoptive families or foster parents in our parishes, you know? opening our eyes to these things is really, really crucial, because we're not, Jesus didn't tell us to leave this all up to bureaucracies, you know? And so, Erika, can you talk a little bit about your experience, you know, meeting some of these pro-lifers, and how you've seen the pro-life movement at work during your life thus far? And you know, and I include too, you know, being a mother is at the heart of the pro-life movement. You know, I think people don't realize the contribution they're making just by that witness, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting when you picked up the statue of Dorothy Day. I wanted to add the one more part of my story is that Dorothy Day was a bit of an inspiration for me to come back to the Catholic Church, in the sense that one of the Catholic workers came to my college to speak after the experience that I shared before. And I went to argue with him, actually, because he was talking about, I think, Catholicism and recovery from drug addiction, or the Catholic worker and recovery. And I was so like, what do Catholics have to say about this? You know, with a chip on my shoulder. And I went and I was bowled over by the true kind of humility and humanity of this man. And I spent the next couple of hours with him talking about, you know, God and prayer and things that I hadn't talked to anybody else at college. You know, I'd kind of gone down into the town to talk to townies at the meetings about, and I was really moved by him to then go to a Newman Club meeting, and thus it began. But yeah, I mean, the question of, you know, the pro-life movement, it's funny. I definitely have lived out my the pro-life cause, both in my home and in my work. And I actually, last year was the first time I made it down to the march, because I had, you know, babies success, you know, in many years in a row. And then I just wasn't able to get down, but my daughters had been going for a couple of years. So I made it down to the march for the first time. And it was really beautiful. I think it was you, Kathryn, who might have written recently that you love, you go kind of ahead on the march, and you love just to see the people in the march. And that was so beautiful to me. But I think, yeah, it's just I think you're right in that a lot of little things, the little things that we do to support just families, and because that's really, you know, the place where life is nurtured, where you know, the virtues that enable people to be generous and independent in their own lives, it's where it all happens, right? And so I think really supporting families and trying to find ways to do that in our own lives, you know, talking to mothers who are having just difficulties, either whether it's in their marriages or you know, raising children and all that. We all have them, and we all need help in those things. And so I think there's such a model for you know, older people in parishes, older couples helping out younger couples, or older women helping out younger women, older men helping out younger men, who are trying to do this stuff, because sometimes we really just need to reach those who are very, very close to us, so that they're doing their work really well, their work, kind of the noble work in their homes of caring for children, whatever else their work is. And so I think that's kind of where I've tried to situate myself, with lots and lots of respect. My babysitter who comes in the mornings, she spends a lot of time she's one of the loveliest women I've ever met. And she spends a lot of time praying outside of abortion clinics, something I also have never done. And so, you know, I think it's really important that, you know, to just realize how big the pro-life movement is, and that we're each called to some portion of it. And that it's really important just to know what that is by really discerning what we feel called to, and where we think our talents are best used in the time that we have, and just being incredibly generous in that kind of area or arena of life, and just really letting kind of God lead us. I'm, you know, especially fond of the rosary. I feel like I get every inspiration while I'm praying the rosary. But I think that, you know, allowing God to sort of shepherd us, to know that that we should just, you know, be where He wants us to be in this movement, and that we really need to love with His love, because it's really the kind of the only hope. I mean, it's a tangled web right now out there, and it's kind of going to be worse in the next couple of years potentially. But I think not calling names of other pro-lifers or other Catholics or other Christians, and really trying to build bridges. And that's also what I see a lot of my work is trying to build bridges to feminists too. And there are many, and there are bridges that are being built, which is very exciting, because there is a concern, well-intentioned concern among feminists who call themselves care feminists and others, to be more hospitable to women who are trying to care for children. And so how do we do that in a way that also holds up our principles, is a kind of an urgent task as well.
I didn't know that Dorothy Day Catholic worker story of yours. I'm so glad you told it. And Dorothy Day is such an example for me. I mean, she is considered generally of the left, but I think if you just sort of leave it there, you totally misunderstand Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was someone who intensely loved Christ after her conversion, and she always, when you read her writing, as a child, she was kind of fascinated with the Beatitudes and things, and so God was after her, as He is with all of us from before we're born, right? But she, of course, had an abortion, and that was an abortion that haunted her for her whole life, and she went to confession, and but even in her 70s, she wrote an article for Commonweal about that abortion, and so she's such an example to me of hospitality and all the work that she did, and rigorously trying to follow God's will. But also and you see this in so much of her writing, she also exposes for us the human pain that, really the sexual revolution and all of those things really inflict on people. And that's some of the work that you do, Sister Magdalene, at the sisters, as you were talking about, you're the Visitation Mission, and so you're who women will go to if they're struggling or they don't want to have an abortion. You also have a ministry that cares for women who have had abortions.
Yes.
What's your experience of you've talked a little bit about it, but I'm thinking of people who maybe don't know what they think about abortion, because one of the most encouraging things to me is the Knights of Columbus for like a dozen years have been commissioning these polls. And it's so clear, and it's consistent with other polling too, that people who call themselves pro-choice are not people who wake up in the morning thinking about Planned Parenthood. They're not people for whom this is a priority, but they want to know that a woman has choices, a woman who is in need has choices. And so, Sister Magdalene, can you just talk a little bit about what women need, and also, keeping in mind that I'm hoping our audience is both people who are pro-life and want to do that better, and also people who are not pro-life, who are pro-choice and want to know, why on earth we insist that abortion should be illegal.
Sure. Well, I think, you started a little bit with Dorothy Day, and that she was a big hero of our founder, Cardinal O'Connor. He just loved her and was working on her cause actually during his lifetime. And she's a great example of the woman who has suffered an abortion, and it colored her whole life with a huge, heavy burden of sorrow. And I think maybe for those who call themselves pro-choice, but probably aren't donating to Planned Parenthood or something, but maybe need a way to give people real choices. It's something to really get to know the story of these women. So we also, as you said, have a mission that is called Hope and Healing for those who've suffered abortion in the past. And those women are beacons in the darkness, actually, because they're so incredibly amazing. And when they share their story, the suffering almost as if it was firsthand. And you just can't deny the sorrow and the suffering. And so I think meeting them, knowing them so well, has even driven me, towards a deeper love and knowledge of those, and a deeper desire to make sure that no one really has to choose that path. And I think that is really what I would encourage people to have a heart for those who've suffered and get to know their story. Not everybody's able to say that the day after they have an abortion, but in 10 years, in 20 years, you will hear that story and they're able to process it. But you know, it can be as little as having a cup of tea with a woman that can change a whole story. You know, that she has a friend can be enormous. Of course, we did mention a little bit about how going to the doctor's appointment can be essential, actually, definitely in New York, but I think it's creeping across the country, that there's a lot of pressure within the medical system to always be looking for, you know, they call it a search and destroy sometimes, you know, they're looking for anomalies, or it's just difficult to navigate all alone. So if someone were to have the time, a lot of it, I think, you know, giving money can sometimes be easy, but giving time is hard. And so that's kind of what I think is necessary, is the time. But then, you know, not to put down a little bit of donations for, you know, it can be the diapers, it can be the stroller, the crib, all of that does have a place. And it does help a woman know that she will be cared for. And just, yeah, so we have a program of volunteering, which is called the Coworker Program. That's one way. I think every pro-life agency and group has a way to step in for the laity. And so we love having our coworkers. They're enormous. We really couldn't do any of what we do without them. They'll drive women around, they'll deliver things, they'll go to a cup of tea once a week with a woman, go to dinner, be a friend. When everyone else, maybe you've thought of this, but everyone else might leave her over this decision she's making to choose life. They're embarrassed to be with her. Now, when the baby's born, they're all back. It's some sort of weird phenomenon. And they all want to hold the baby and take pictures with the baby, but during the pregnancy, she's alone. So that's a huge place of stepping in, you know, and it really takes presence, you know, to be with her. That's something our culture has really let go, is this presence, you know, the being, rather than doing, rather than buying, but being, makes the biggest difference. And you might have to wear a mask, but it's better to be with her, you know, so. Yeah.
One of you know, the things that's happening in the public square right now, and part of the reason for having this panel, is people who are for legal abortion talking about all the other pro-life issues, and but excluding abortion, you know, and so you know, immigration and climate change and all of these things are pro-life issues, and I don't disagree that those are pro-life issues too, but we have to start with the vulnerable, without a voice baby in the womb. And I think I think so much stems from that. So many of the evils in our society stem from that. And if we can see the unborn child and we can help his mother, I think it changes the way we look at everything. And I think that needs to be an examination of conscience for pro-lifers too. You know, when we say that that everyone's made in the image and likeness of God, and so this child was made in the image and likeness of God, do people believe us when we say that? You know, if we're calling people names, or, you know, treating people like they weren't made in the image and likeness of God. So if you describe yourself as pro-life and are opposed to abortion, which I think is a prerequisite for calling yourself pro-life, you need to reflect that in all of your life, and how you look at other issues. You know, I love how Pope Francis talks about these things, a throwaway society. We have that, and it starts with human life. If we throw away human life, then what matters, right? What do we value? And Erika, I think that's some of what you've been speaking into. You talk about bridge building, and one of the things that you write about in your upcoming book, and you've written about before, is taking, you know, the good that is in feminism, the good intentions, you know, and and looking at it in a new light. I have to apologize to you because before this event, I retweeted one of your articles. And so you've gotten a lot of nasty tweets. And it was about Amy Coney Barrett being a feminist icon. You also, another one that I tweeted that people didn't get as mad about, as you might imagine, was you wrote a beautiful article for America magazine talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her beautiful marriage, which you didn't agree with her politics, but oh my goodness, that was her marriage was beautiful. You know, also her friendship with Antonin Scalia was beautiful. And we live in this culture where people are afraid or refuse to acknowledge those things. When you see something beautiful in someone who you disagree with, I was horrified the day after the violence at the Capitol. There was more security outside the Planned Parenthood that I go to pray. And so there were security guards, and then there were escorts, volunteers. Because I was praying the rosary across the street, I could tell these women thought that I hated them. And so, you know, I kind of had to pass by them afterward, and I said, "Good afternoon." And they just glared at me. And it's horrifying to me that we live in a time where it's just assumed because you disagree that, you know, you hate, you have contempt. And oh my goodness, I don't have contempt for anyone in that building. I want them to have something better, you know. I know, you know, these are livelihoods for people. Abby Johnson talks about that, you know, with her ministry to try to get people out of abortion clinics. You know, if you leave your job, that's a serious thing. It's not just a cause. It's a job. So anyway, Erika, could you share some of your thoughts on how you take, you know, the good intentions and try to come together in common ground?
Sure. I mean, I think it's easy in sense for me, maybe easier than for others, because I was I was a feminist once. I still consider myself a feminist once I define that term. But I think, you know, having been on that side of things, having many friends who are on that side of things, and being around people who are not only well-intentioned, but good and decent human beings, makes it a lot easier for me to kind of look across what seems like this wide chasm right now, and just see friends. Or, you know, as President Lincoln said, you know, we shouldn't call people enemies. We should think about, you know, them being friends, the potential of making them friends. I'm misquoting that, but I think that that's really the goal of political discourse, and really an assumption of our politics, our republic, is that there's this understanding of kind of a civic friendship that's built on kind of, you know, at least wanting to will the good for each other, that we've really kind of lost. And so I think, you know, fundamental things that we need to do are what we've been talking about, is really basic stuff in our own homes, is, you know, teaching, as you mentioned before, the virtues, which is kind of a fundamental point in my book. But just looking again at how important the work of the home is, the domestic work that I think both mothers and fathers need to be deeply engaged in terms of helping their own children develop kind of the virtues that allow them to have a generous spirit with others, to practice, you know, benevolence with others, to practice kindness, and all those things that are just sort of basic habits of decency, but also that we're called to as Christians in terms of charity. So I think that has to be sort of fundamental to how we engage with one another, how we talk to one another. And then, you know, in terms of finding common ground, because we're human beings, and, we, I think, seek the good in the things that we do, it's always possible to find common ground with even, you know, those with whom we disagree most vehemently. But we have to make efforts to do that. And why do we want to do that? It's because we want to make progress for, those, you know, who we care most about. So for me, that's poor women and children. You know, I can remember so well having a debate out at the University of St. Thomas with a Notre Dame history professor who was pro-choice. And at some point she looked at me and she said, well, we can agree on wanting to help poor women and children. So let's work on that. You know, let's work on that. And I just thought, that's a place where so many of us can come together. And there's so many things that the Biden administration has already done that have, ruffled my feathers for sure. but I think, wanting to increase the child tax credit is a really, really good thing. And, frankly was, taken up by conservatives first in terms of Rick Santorum and others. So that's something that we should come together on soon, fast, is really, because it's a way that we can be, a culture more hospitable to family life, more hospitable, to understanding the kinds of virtues that are built within families that are necessary for anything that we do, economically, politically, culturally. It's all, so much happens in the family. And so to be to reorient our politics toward that end, toward, being hospitable to family life, I think is something that both sides can definitely come around right now. And it's kind of, I think an urgent matter. And so putting aside that, the other questions about like, is that the only thing we need to do to really be pro-life? Well, no, because laws instruct people, laws instruct, those help kind of direct toward the good and help people avoid evil. I mean, that's just what law does. And so when we fund abortion, we're going to get more of it. And when, we make abortion widely available, we're going to get more of it. When we put it on every, corner in New York, we're going to get more of it. So, I mean, I think, those are kind of some key points in going forward.
Yes, it was just yesterday. I happened to be praying outside the Planned Parenthood in the afternoon rounds of abortions, and the boyfriends were dropping their girlfriends off, and I was watching them kind of bond on the street. And like one of them had clearly done this before, and so the other one was asking like, how long does it take, and these questions. And what struck me was neither one of them looked happy to be there. They looked like, well, this is what's expected, this is what we do, this is what guys do, right? And this is what the girls have to do. And I say that complimenting your point on the law, Sister Magdalene can testify to, because it's legal and because it's so often expected, the woman really has all this pressure that she wouldn't have if it weren't so widely available. She almost feels like it's the responsible thing to do. Yeah. Is that your experience?
Yeah, with me, yeah, I definitely see that many times. There's just I remember a woman after she suffered an abortion saying it was just too easy to put my Medicaid card on the counter, and she didn't think about it, she just ran there. So yeah, it really is, they think they would, in some ways the law would be, if the law taught what we would think of as natural law, then they would feel the freedom of that and the protection of that. And I think that people just really, I go back to the point though, that it's so key to themselves to know that there's something more in their own maternity that's so beautiful, that we're really just dumbing down to, you've got to be responsible and you have to take care of this and you can't burden society. Well, she has more love than that, and I think that's a good, thought. And I also just you were thinking a bit about, I'm just remembering another question about, how we can get at this. I was asking the sisters at lunch, and somebody came up with a really good idea of a gratitude campaign in this time where a lot of people are doing things online. But like, gratitude is such a way of celebrating life, and I was just thinking about the pro-life movement, because praying at a clinic takes a special person. And I usually feel like I'm hit by a Mack truck when I'm there. So I'm not sure. I just don't really think it's the only answer. And all these ways are so helpful. Being a mom, being so supportive of other families, beautiful, beautiful. But I thought about, just when the sisters were saying like a gratitude campaign, if we are thankful for our own lives, if we're thankful for our parents, we're thankful for the sun that shines in my window, if we're thankful for a bird that chirps, for the man who whistles while he's, sweeping the sidewalk, all these things are so enormously life transforming that I think our culture has lost, and it is pro-life. It's, you know, it's a bit less, you know, making a difference in this person's life, but it's making a difference when we have gratitude and when we teach gratitude, I think. So just putting that out there.
Oh goodness, I could never agree more about that. I mean, I think gratitude is at the heart of the pro-life movement, right? We're grateful for the gift of life, and so we protect it and we celebrate it. And Erika had mentioned before, you know, the point about a call, and I think what you just said, Sister Magdalene, is so important. Not everyone needs to pray outside of an abortion clinic. Not everyone needs to adopt a child out of the foster care system, but some of us do. Some of us are being called, and we're all being called to something. And so I think at this critical moment where obviously things are getting harder, not easier for anyone who considers themselves pro-life and opposes abortion, particularly when we have this level of confusion because there's a Catholic president who is looking to expand abortion, really, is what he's saying when he says he's going to codify Roe v. Wade. And I was very hurt by that statement he made on the Roe v. Wade anniversary, because I wanted to take him at his word during the inaugural address that he wanted to be a president for all of us and to be a healer and a uniter, and that was not a move of a healer or a uniter. So I pray for him that those words can become more a part of his administration, and I understand all of the pressures that are on him from the party and the interests, but we have to pray for something better in our politics. But being that what it is, we have so many choices we can make in our days about how we can make this country look more pro-life. And I think what you were saying, Sister Magdalene, is so true. You know, if you read, for instance, John Paul II's Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, there's so much joy in it. There's also such an acknowledgement of the pain of abortion and the culture of death, as he calls it. But it's also important he talks about the culture of life and the civilization of love. And those of us who oppose abortion have to have that love in mind all the time. And both of you have talked about time and presence. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, you know, New York is really, it's, Sister Magdalene can testify because she's here with me. It's so dark right now. There's so much addiction visible on the streets, so much violence and anger. And it can be overwhelming to walk through the streets, to be honest with you. But, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody on the phone who does some amazing ministries. And I was telling him about this woman who, you know, I wanted to help, you know, and he said something to me like, you know, sometimes you don't have to fix it. You just need to be present and listen. And I did realize that I don't know what all the complicating factors are, but she's having a hard time receiving, you know, Catholic Charities help and things like that. And you know what? I just have to love her when I see her and listen to her. And she said to me a few days ago, talking to you is like a good cry. It makes me feel so much better. And like, jeepers, I'm not ending homelessness in New York, but I think that's what God's calling me to do, right? And those are the kind of questions I think we need to ask ourselves more and appreciate that all the people in politics who are saying, you know, you're not pro-life because you're not doing this and you're not on this issue, and they need to see our love. And so I think I think a lot of us can get defensive when we hear these things, you know, and think, well, but you don't care about unborn children, right? Well, they don't see it that way, first of all, because our culture is so confused. But also, if they did see our love on all different kinds of scales, and they saw our presence in our community, as you were talking about, Erika, just being a friend, you know, that, you know, I know that doesn't solve the problem of bias in the media and all of these things, but it's the contribution, you know, we may be called to make. And I always, obviously we want to be successful, but I always think of Mother Teresa talking about, you know, faithfulness. That's what God calls us to, not necessarily success. So when we're overwhelmed with, you know, pro-abortion president and all of these things, I think we need to remember that. All right, what's God asking for me to do here? There's one question, we could have this conversation for hours. We were having a lot of questions come in. One of them is about men. We've talked about obviously the needs of women, but how do, first of all, there's an impact on men, but also insights on how we can help men, appreciate the Sisters of Life just do such a good job of revering really motherhood, as you were talking about earlier. When the father can be in a picture, what a wonderful thing, right? And I was so struck, I was seeing in one of my outside the clinic situations, a pro-life person was unfortunately saying some things that I didn't think that were very helpful to one of the boyfriends. But at the same time, there was a truth in it about, taking responsibility, and she was kind of saying you're emasculated and stuff, and I didn't think that was the best approach. But men, like I was saying before, sort of feel this expectation too. And I know, Sister Magdalene, that the sisters, do work with men too. And what have been some of your experiences, just insights on how we can help men embrace the culture of life too?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen that, I guess there's like commercials out there. I don't know what it is, but it seems like they've, the whole culture, not just men, but has kind of drunk the Kool-Aid. And so men will often say, whatever you want, I'll support you either way. And it sounds good, but in the end, her heart is desiring to hear, this is our baby. This is the fruit of our love. I'm here for you. So I kind of think there needs to be commercials about that, or that every mother teaches their son, given this situation, you need to answer much better. The whole, I'll support you either way, really, the woman feels like that's, I really want you to have an abortion. Deep down, I really want you to have an abortion. So I think that's just one thing. But I think with the men too, is they're just as afraid as the women. And so when they're, in the throes of it, and if you're able to bump into them during that time, really just meeting them where they're at. The other day, I happened to take a young man to a motorcycle garage, because there's these bikers that are friends of ours, and they had the most enormously fun time just talking about bikes, and in 1901 this is how bikes were made, and I don't know, it was an amazing moment. And I just think treating them with the dignity as well, because chances are they've never really been basically entrusted with responsibility of this magnitude, and they're afraid, they're running for their lives. And so just realizing that they're not evil, they're not out to kill this baby, they're afraid for their lives, and when you define it in truth, it really helps us make a lot of good decisions of how to talk to them, and how to, because even St. Joseph, whose year it is, he was going to divorce Our Lady quietly. He was a bit nervous, and that's okay. That's okay. God worked that one out, and God has the power to work this out, and maybe we can help them take a nap and have a nice dream or something, and then the angel can appear and it'll all work out. But I don't know. I just think that there's really something to listening in. We have this class that we have, which is listening skills. So which I think a lot of people have, but what it helps us do is reflect what, we want to reflect them. So if they feel heard, like if we reflect what they're telling us in a meaningful way, and they feel heard, it's almost that they could arrive at the right decision on their own. It's way easier than telling them this is what you should do, because they actually follow through on it. So if they arrive at it through reflective listening, it's an enormous gift to them. And it's both men and women really, but I find that men will definitely not be listening to you if you're telling them what to do. So it's a lovely thing to reflectively listen, but it takes time, takes listening. Yeah. Just to invest, I guess. Yeah.
Well, again, the time and the presence.
Yeah.
I think we have to have such tremendous empathy for for both the men and the women in this situation, because Erika, the law lies to them. You know, it suggests this is a good abortion, and how are they supposed to know anything different if all the forces in the culture aren't, and maybe they in many cases don't have support. And we've heard so many stories over the years, all of us, I'm sure, about, you know, the good religious person who, you know, once it's their child, you know, it's a different tone. And so there's just so much confusion and untruth. And yeah, do you have any thoughts on that in the context of moving forward, Erika?
Well, I spend a lot of my work actually talking about men, whom I love. I love very good men. I'm amazed by good men, in fact, because I think the culture is really, it's hard to be a good man in this culture today. And you know, there's so many different you know, places I could go with this, but I think that the abortion regime we have right now does a couple of things to men. One is that, you know, in Planned Parenthood versus Casey, you know, the court upheld many of the Pennsylvania restrictions on abortion, but struck down the spousal notice provision. And you know, since then, there's been no capacity for a husband or a boyfriend or the father of the child to have any say whatsoever in the abortion decision, which I think has got to be so difficult for so many men out there. And you know, the other thing is that abortion, of course, and this is what I've written a lot about, lets men off the hook. And this is just, you know, a basic pro-life feminist tenet, going all the way back to actually Mary Wollstonecraft, who is one of the leading figures in my own book. But you know, there's a way in which that the way we've thought about equality in our society, and how, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I definitely applaud in many ways, understood equal citizenship, is this very male-oriented understanding. You know, that we can, it doesn't acknowledge this, what I call sexual asymmetry, which is the fact that, you know, when men and women engage in the same sexual act, it's women but not men who end up pregnant. And so the cure, you know, to equalize the situation for the pro-choice feminist is abortion. But it's not the same sort of thing. You know, a man, you know, in that situation just can walk away. And that's really what we're saying to women is imitate the irresponsible child abandoning man, but not just by walking away, by actually killing your child to whom you owe duties of care. And not only do you owe duties of care, properly speaking, but so does the father of that child. And so it's kind of, you know, looking to try to reorient ourselves around duties of care, which are actually, you know, what ground rights, properly speaking, which is really what my very big, long book is about. But one of the reasons I actually really love current language of reproductive justice is because I think it really gets at I think some key kind of points in this whole discussion if we kind of think about it properly. Because if justice is giving each his due, the very first person, the very first, you know, individual in the situation to should be receiving justice is, of course, the prenatal child. And then from there flow, you know, the justice due to the mother, who is, of course, the first one to give care to the child, but then also to the father, who gives care both to the mother and to the child, but then also to the society at large, who's called upon far more than today to create, as I've talked about, kind of hospitality for life, or maybe, you know, you could think about it like an ecosystem of care where we're, you know, not taking away the responsibility of care for people who have a hard time doing so, but we're really empowering them to do so better, which is what I think the Sisters of Life really do, is helping women and men who are in these situations, mothers and fathers, recognize, you know, the duties they have, the responsibilities that they have, the power and influence that comes in, you know, raising a child, and the way that our hearts expand in doing so and transform. I mean, I can tell you, 20 years ago, if you had told me I would have 7 children, I would have literally jumped off a cliff. And today I can tell you how much my heart has expanded with each child. And it is just a mystery to me, but it is such an incredible thing. This last child, especially, who I was, got pregnant when I was 43, 7 years after the child before that. I was a visiting scholar at Harvard Law School, thought I was kind of, raising my children and moving on to my academic work. And here was this child. And I can tell you, though it was dismaying to me at first, the love, joy, I mean, just that child has brought into every single person in this family. It's the single best thing. My children, I mean, they would say that every one of them, if you line them up behind me right now, would say Charlotte is the best thing in their life. So I think it's hard for us to see that, but it's enabling mothers and fathers to really become, as you say, become who they are. And I mean, one final story, I think the time is short here, but my brother actually, was in a situation where his girlfriend was going to have an abortion, and he took responsibility for that child. And it has made him he raised a child pretty much on his own, and now is married to another woman, and they've raised the children's child together, have a new baby. But what a man it made him by taking on that responsibility for himself. And I think a lot of men in this culture could use some manning up and really taking, being allowed to take responsibility, obviously to be given, and getting rid of this crazy law, which disenables them from doing that. But we'd really see much more, responsibility for each other if we took private violence off the table.
I would be remiss, since we're talking about men, if I didn't mention the Into the Breach program that the Knights of Columbus have. Is a series of videos, and the Sisters of Life are actually in some of them, that really talks about what it means to be a man, and it tackles all kinds of issues, including abortion. But I've spoken to men who have used them with their sons and for discussion, and I think the Knights just do a lot of great good in our society. And we're at the closing point. So Sister Magdalene, I just wanted to say very quickly that story you told about the bikers. I wanted to make clear this was a teenager who was alive because of the work the Sisters of Life do, and you specifically had been played a role, and I mention that because sometimes there's this caricature of pro-lifers that we only care about the child before the child is born, and the Sisters of Life are with the families for the long haul. I've been at your Easter celebrations and things like that, where you have mothers and their children years later. I've met teenagers. And so you become a part of their lives. They become a part of your lives. And I've seen that with other pro-life ministries as well. And Sister Magdalene, since we're out of time, I want to give you the last word. Maybe words of encouragement and challenge for pro-lifers going forward, and maybe specifically on this this phrase "celebrating life," this idea that you brought up at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I think this, I think we just all human nature, we tend to make things really complicated, and that's great for most of us. But I think in the end, it is like to celebrate life, to celebrate the culture of life can make an enormous difference. Things like celebrating a birthday, things like, maybe planting a rose garden in honor of life, or having maybe on the side of the Sheen Center building the Mother of Life, like a little memorial. I don't know, because it used to have a statue there, by the way. But then there's things like,
I should say, Sister mentions the Sheen Center because it's a property owned by the Archdiocese that's right next to Planned Parenthood in Lower Manhattan.
But just maybe having a life fest up at Orisville, because it's a very unused place where the blood of the martyrs were, and we could actually unite the blood of the unborn with the blood of the martyrs. I mean, there's just so many ways.
Jesuit martyrs.
Yeah, there's also doing a life fest in Central Park. Like, we could really celebrate life. We could. And so I just recommend it. Yeah, and so I challenge people to celebrate with their whole being, but even like gazing on your child in your arms, that's a celebration of life. So it can be the smallest to the biggest. I approve of all of them. Yeah.
If I could make one last point about birthdays, I am amazed when I take the time, which I don't often do, because we can be so transactional without even thinking about it. Take the time to write somebody a note about the impact they've had in your life. It can take 5 minutes to do this, 10 minutes maybe. It can have such an impact on a person. A note, or an email you don't have to send, or a phone call. One of the upsides, the mercies of the pandemic is I think people talk on the phone more, actually pick up the phone, not just send emails. And I'm able to see your beautiful faces. It's nicer in person, but this will do for now. And I do have to say, because of what you do, your witness, Erika, and because of what you do, Sister Magdalene, and who you are, both of you, I'm encouraged about the work ahead, which is going to be very difficult, but we are a people of hope. And as we were saying, the future of abortion in America is not up to any one individual of us, and it's God's work, and we just have to make ourselves available. And it's also the work of human rights, and Pope Francis has been talking a lot about that. So even if you're not Catholic, even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not a person of faith, there's common ground we can come to together on this. The innocent, defenseless, we love and we want to protect, and that starts with the unborn, that continues through the end of life, and every stage in between. And so yes, we care about the human person, and it has to start with abortion. But even if you can't start there, we want to work with you. It's like the letter that Archbishop Gomez wrote to President Biden, that there is this truth that we do not agree about, but we want to work together wherever we can. And I think that's a spirit with which we need to approach these next years. And with that, I really want to thank the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University. I went to Catholic University, so I'm super excited that we were able to come together kind of at my alma mater virtually. And as always, I'm grateful to the National Review Institute for letting me do things like this. And I'm so happy that the Catholic Women's Forum at the Ethics and Public Policy Center exists and is co-sponsoring. And EPPC is a home to you, Erika. And so that's a tremendous thing. And they have wonderful other fellows too. So thank you, Sister Magdalene, for making the time. Thank you, Erika, for making the time. And thank you everyone who's watching live or will watch later. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but I will be sharing them with the panelists, and they will definitely inform our thinking and prayers going forward. So thank you.